Okay. My questions are basically, were the Q3 results what the board and leadership was expecting? And dovetailing with that, when will you make a description on capital projects? Because what we're hearing is that anything that is not in construction will basically be on hold outside of the two airport projects.
Uh, well, let me start with the first, which is these. Uh, the agency has been watching carefully the trajectory of the recovery of volume in with respect to each of our four operating line departments. Based on that analysis, we have developed scenarios in terms of both projected revenue and projected capital capacity. Both of those, however, are subject to future revision precisely because as more data comes in, we are able to refine our projection of the recovery, the volume recovery. And the other key variable here is the amount of federal aid that will be forthcoming with respect to our request to Washington. So our projections of the summer, which at that point took into account the slower recovery of traffic at the airports and at our commuter railroad path, that required an adjustment downward of our projections. We also made a update in terms of the seaport's performance and our bridges and tunnels performance. So with the summer adjustment, which was downward, the third quarter came in quite close to what the new projection was. But I say that carefully because the reason our projection was accurate is because we made it at the beginning of the third quarter, and the third quarter turned out over 2 months to be quite close to what that projection had become. So, and this is leading into your capital question. So, we're not in the business of making final decisions on the capital plan until we have greater confidence in the answers to the two key issues. Number one, where we have some additional data on what the recovery trajectory at each of our facilities will be. And secondly, where we get additional clarity on what DC will do in terms of further stimulus funding. Obviously, the situation in Washington, the paralysis there over the past few months has been extremely frustrating. Obviously, the election is days away. We believe that over the next relatively short period of time, we will have greater clarity on what is going to happen in Washington. And so before we make final decisions on the capital plan, we need additional experience. And to comment specifically, Larry, on your questions about in construction and pre-construction, we have made the quite explicit statement that because it's the only sensible course to pursue, which is that for projects that are well into construction, shutting them down is not a viable option. So we are committed in terms of projects that are in construction, with very few exceptions. There are some. mostly smaller projects. We are committed to completing those, but we have not made a decision with respect to projects that are in pre-construction, other than to be on high alert in terms of what their timelines would be, and putting ourselves in a position to assure that as we move forward here, that we are not overcommitted in terms of our capital capacity. So that's really where we are. We're being sure that projects in design don't move actively into construction with the award of contract until we know better the precise dynamic or the precise dimension of our capital capacity. But we are keeping in the capital plan at the moment all the projects that have been in it. But we are not, as I say, making major commitments with respect to moving projects into construction. But you have to realize the design phase, the pre-construction phase of these projects is a period of intense work. It happens to be design work. It happens to be preliminary engineering work. And in some cases, the LaGuardia Air Train is a perfect example. It is in the process of environmental review, so that to move that project forward requires moving it through the environmental review process, which is not one of substantial expense. So we continue to move projects forward as a matter of readiness, but with the caution flag that before we move into an RFP or into a matter of actually awarding a contract, that we feel that we have further information with respect to the recovery trajectory and with respect to whether we will receive federal aid from DC.
Okay, great. Moving on to Samantha Maldonado from Politico.
Oh, hi. I'm just curious. You talked a little bit about Washington and getting some more certainty there in terms of a stimulus or rescue package. I'm curious also if there's been any, I mean, of course there has, but what sort of consideration has been paid to Gateway as well, and what you're hoping for as the election comes to a head?
We're hoping that Washington ends the paralysis and the refusal to step forward to fund the single most critical infrastructure project in the country. From our point of view, the failure of the federal government to step up to this project is truly a national disgrace.
Okay, great. Clayton Guzza from the Daily News.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Rick. I got two questions. First of all, on the mass fine that goes into place on Monday, I'm just curious about enforcement on that, particularly at the airports. I'm wondering, will Port Authority Police be enforcing that on both sides of security? Kind of the question is, where does Port Authority enforcement begin and TSA enforcement end, or vice versa? And then I have one more question.
Okay, so, well, let me take a step back. First of all, we have seen very high percentage compliance with the mask requirement. We've seen that at the airports, we've seen that on PATH, we've seen that at the bus terminal. By making violators, making individuals who are not wearing masks subject to a $50 fine, we are emphasizing the criticality of complying with the mask mandate. We're still going to put very, very heavy reliance on achieving voluntary compliance, but we believed in terms of the enforcement effort that it was important to signal to the public, to signal to users of our facilities, that this is at the heart of stopping the spread of the coronavirus, and we want to be as strong as possible a contributor to assuring that that responsibility is taken seriously. Specifically with respect to the airports, every portion of the airport facility is a Port Authority responsibility, with one exception, which is the sterile zone established by Customs and Border Protection. So the enforcement responsibility and authority of the Port Authority extends to the airport, with the exception of that sterile federal area. And we will take that responsibility seriously. And so our efforts, both in terms of airport personnel and in terms of Port Authority police, will be to assure and enforce the mask mandate at all of our facilities.
Got it. And just circling back on LaGuardia Air Train, you highlighted your public comments from last month, but can you give us an update, or just kind of give us an overview? How much longer will the environmental review process go on? What hurdles are you waiting on? What approvals are you waiting on right now? And do you have a timeline for that process?
Well, it is in the hands of the Federal Aviation Administration. We have we are playing a supportive role in terms of assisting their analysis. If you go back to May or June of 2018, see if I got this right, no, May or June of 2019, which was when they began their process, they set an outside limit of 2 years on their process, which would expire roughly in May of next year. We have, throughout the process, encouraged as rapid progress as possible. But what remains, now that the public comment period has closed, sits with the FAA. They're next, in terms of what happens next. They will issue a final environmental impact statement, and thereafter, assuming that they come to a positive conclusion on the project, they will issue a so-called record of decision, and at that point, we will move forward as promptly as we can on beginning the procurement process for the construction of the air train. I might say, just to note in terms of the FAA, when they issued the draft environmental impact statement in August, they ratified, they embraced the Port Authority's alignment, the route by which the air train runs from between the airport and the Met's Willets Point station as their preferred alternative. That alignment was the Port Authority's preferred alignment, but as of the issuance of the draft environmental impact statement, that now has become the FAA's preferred alignment as well, and we regard that as a very, very important step forward.
Moving on to Carol Ward from Airport Experience News. Carol Ward. Carol, you on? Carol, you're on mute. We will circle back. David Meyer from the Post.
I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Okay, great. Circling back. Carol, are you still there?
Can you take her off?
I can't. I don't know.
Amber.
She can take herself. She has to take herself off.
Carol, I think you can take yourself off mute. All right, we will circle back to you. Any additional questions, guys, just reach out to me or Ben, and we will get back to you. Thanks, everyone.